eve of World War One, no country was prepared to admit that aircrafts would make a significant impact on warfare. But some efforts were made to use aircrafts for military purposes prior to World War One. Some of the earliest efforts took place in Italy in April 1909 by the newly formed Italian Aviation Club, Club Aviatori, brought Wilbur Wright to Italy to demonstrate his military flyer at the Centocelli military base near Rome. Before leaving Rome, Wilbur trained the naval officer who would become Italy's first pilot, Lieutenant Mario Caldera. In 1910, Italy would set up its first flying school in Centocelli. The Italian invasion of Libya began on October 2nd, 1911, and had gone off relatively smoothly. But the transportation of the Italian air fleet could not be undertaken until after the fall of Tripoli. Thus, it was not done until October 21 that Captain Piazza could report that his aircrafts were ready for action. The world's first combat air flight took place on October 23rd, 1911, when the commander of the air fleet, Captain Piazza, took off at 6:19 a.m. to reconnoiter Turkish positions. In a 61-minute flight, he discovered several enemy encampments while he was airborne. Captain Riccardo Miosi also took off to report enemy positions. By this time, military observations from balloons had been conducted for many years, but this was the first time that military observation aircrafts were being used. The difference was enormous. While balloons were tethered normally, the aircraft was free to fly wherever it could, and as the pilot wished, allowing him to observe many more positions for hundreds of square miles than a balloon observer could. There followed a year-long series of sorties which, under extremely dangerous conditions, French military air force had signaled the Italian headquarters that it had found daylight flights over the desert to be particularly hazardous because of the air currents and the possibility of sandstorms. Nonetheless, the Italian air fleet carried on with surprising efficiency for an initial effort at full-scale warfare. On October 26, Captain Moises Newport became the first aircraft ever to sustain combat damage. He had discovered a large encampment of some 6,000 men and came under heavy rifle fire, suffering 3 hits to its wings, but no major damage. It fell to Second Lieutenant Giulio Gabriotti to make the world's first combat bombing sortie. He carried 4 grenade-like Cipelli bombs. Each weighed about 4 pounds and roughly the size of a grapefruit. He dropped one on a Turkish position in Anzara and 3 others on the oasis of Tatura. Giovati's raid was widely reported and had great effect on the thinking of airmen in other armies. Another raid by this time by Captain Miosi resulted in Turkish government issuing that would become familiar protest. They stated that the bombs had been dropped on hospital, claimed that Italians investigated and denied. The tempo of the air campaign was accelerated, with heavier bombs being brought into play. Reconnaissance flights took place every day until weather conditions during December and January made regular sorties difficult. During the long campaign, there were also many notable firsts, including the first dropping of the propaganda leaflets, spotting for artillery, night bombings, and reconnaissance missions, and radio communications that involved no less than persons other than Guglielmo Marconi himself. The first pilot to be wounded in combat was Captain Carlo Monti, who was struck by a rifle bullet on January 1912 over Tobruk. Sadly, the first pilot to die in combat is Second Lieutenant Piero Manzini, crashed on August 25th, 1912. Shortly after takeoff for a photographic reconnaissance mission. The valiant Captain Moisio was also the first one to land behind enemy lines when on September 10th his Newport developed engine trouble. He was the first airplane pilot ever to be taken prisoner and was not liberated until the armistice was signed in November 1913. The successful Italian air campaign received worldwide notice. On August 12, 1912, the London Times stated that no one can have observed the work be accomplished by the Italian airplanes at Tripoli without being deeply impressed by the courage and the ability of the Italian pilots and without being convinced of the valuable use of aviation in wartime. On September 10, 1912, the Berliner Tagblatt took a slightly different rise, reporting that for now, at least, airplanes and airships are not practically used as offensive weapons. They have, however, been shown to be very useful for reconnaissance. The Italian command is always thankful to the aircraft, which they said helped them discover the positions of Turkish troops. Moreover, following the photographs in the release map made by the airships and the planes, it has been possible to compile a map with which to conduct the war, as said by the Italian headquarters. The Italian air campaign had great effect upon the Italian people, who rejoiced when the principals were showered with decorations and responded with floods of poetry songs, even a poetry celebrating it. Perhaps the most influential aspect of the Italian campaign was philosophical rather than military, for it fell to Major General Staff Giulio Duhet, provisionary battalion commander, to make the full report on the campaign. Duhet had been for years been an advocate for air power, writing articles in the service journal La Preparazione. But the campaign in Tripoli gave him the first chance to report the facts rather than theories, and he made the most of it. His extensive report analyzed the technical and professional considerations that had affected most of the aircrafts which were used, and he drew interesting inferences on the preparation of the flying personnel, their recruitment and training, as well as the type of aircraft that should be procured by Italy. He concluded with an organizational proposal that became the structural framework for the Italian aviation industry and during the 1918 to 1914 war in Europe. His experience and his report prepared him to be one of Europe's most influential doctrinal writers in development of air power. And that was it for Town Roundabout.